Hi, I'm Tacie Jones, and I'm presenting my work Mending today. I wish that we could all be together, but in lieu of that luxury, we are given the opportunity to present our work virtually, so I'm very glad to be doing that today. I will be going through a series of images to discuss this body of work, which was made as my MFA thesis. I am currently in a PhD program at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. I'm in the interdisciplinary human-centered design PhD, and art is my primary discipline. So without further ado, I will begin to describe my work and give my presentation. Mending is an exhibition of recent sculpture, media installation, and photography works that call attention to a two-part process of reconciling the embodied trauma memory inherited between mothers and daughters, the sensorial reconstruction of embodied memory, and its ritual reconciliation. The body of work in this thesis challenges Walter Benjamin's idea that he who seeks to approach his own buried past must conduct himself like a man digging, by instead embracing an ethos of mending and reclaiming the significance of excavation. While Benjamin seems to disregard the sensorial experience of embodied memory for a more cerebral one, asserting one must, quote, plan excavations methodically, the work within Mending addresses the complex somatic structures of trauma memory through nature and healing practices in contemporary art. Rather than digging and excavating for potential answers to complicated histories, Mending creates space for works developed through methodologies of sensing and feeling embodied memory using sensorial, ritual, and nature immersion. To mend or restore through putting back together is often considered a feminine gesture, historically women's work, and largely associated with repairing articles of torn fabric or ruptured knitting. But nature mends as well. Seen within the body of work in this exhibition, the mother spider, whom artist Louise Bourgeois memorialized as an important protector symbol against patriarchal traumas, meticulously mends the latticework of her web to ensure the safe propagation of future offspring. In the case of Mending, the spider stands in for the victimized mother who is paralyzed by her own embodied traumatic memories. The primary focus of the exhibition Mending addresses alleviating cycles of abuse perpetuated by the embodied memory of women's transgenerational trauma. Transgenerational trauma is an area of study within psychology that has found symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder can be handed down through both psychological and biological factors. Recent studies in epigenetics are also trying to understand how trauma and PTSD symptoms might be retained genetically and encoded within our DNA. I recently discovered this photograph made by my great-aunt and shared with me at her memorial service. I am the child in the photograph on my mother's lap, sitting next to my paternal grandmother. Finding this image, I began to wonder if my grandmother's sister had been asking some of the same questions that I am now exploring in this thesis. If we consider the premise of transgenerational trauma and apply that to the treatment of women, it is not hard to find a thread. The female body has been controlled, manipulated, raped, tortured, and mistreated in many cultures for as long as recorded time. The body of work in the exhibition Mending is broken into two parts. Movement 1 is comprised of two sculptural media installation artworks, Daybed and The Gift. These two works explore the sensorial experience of embodied memory through video projection onto domestic architectural reconstructions, and are positioned into dialogue with one another. The second movement consists of The Ecology of Shame, an installation of still and moving images that document trauma reconciliation through meditative ritual processes, and the final culminating video installation titled Lustration. The two parts are intrinsically linked, both to one another and to current theories of trauma transmission and consciousness healing processes. The progression of work asks the viewer to be present in their bodies as they are led through the complex web of ancestral trauma between mothers and daughters into the healing practices of ritual reconciliation and nature interconnection. Daybed and the Gift represent an implied narrative of childhood trauma through architectural reconstruction paired with evocative video art. Daybed alludes to a place where one sleeps. The room is reminiscent of an 8 by 10 foot unfinished bedroom. The exposed studs of the wall face inward, with video blanketing all four on either side. While the sketchiness of the unfinished room is implied, the interior and exterior spaces are also indicative of what one sees and what remains hidden. This could apply equally to secret, unspoken traumatic experiences and the faces we put on to show the world. The practice of Vipassana meditation has informed the media installation couplet in Mending, which is visually representative of energetic sensation and interconnection. The ultimate goal of this practice is to achieve dissolution, where the meditator becomes intrinsically intertwined with the matter all around them. There is no human presence in the video work of Daybed, but there are traces of physical acts and childlike vulnerability. The video is captured from a low angle, suggesting a child's view of the world. A disquiet swells as vaguely recognizable shapes of sullied baby doll parts emerge from the larger-than-life footage of leaves. A doll graveyard becomes loosely legible with only certain recognizable features framed. The Gift is a reconstruction of a domestic washing space that incorporates video projection. Dainty floral wallpaper frames an old medicine cabinet with oxidized glass and a crystal handle at the center of the wall. Inside the cabinet hangs a small doll's dress, handmade from one of my mother's pillowcases and covered in lace trim. The fragility of innocence is emphasized when juxtaposed with the doll graveyard imagery in Daybed. The dress glows from the light of the video projector, implying an energetic and spiritual transcendence. Hideable and easily locked shamefully away in the cabinet, the dress illuminates as an act of defiance against violation and invisibility. Flowers overlay grasses and clovers, and expeditious garden spider moves gracefully over the surface of the fabric. The mother spider here protects the innocent form, vigilantly safeguarding her future offspring and mending the frayed edges of home. A repurposed construction of thick and rusted galvanized pipe, physically and psychically, supports the backside of the structure. The 9-foot-tall pipe juts out in 5 additional sections. Each of these connections is symbolic of the 7 energy centers found in the center of the body's spine. These metaphysical energy currents are believed to be the channels for our interconnection with universal knowledge or unlimited experience. The galvanized pipes behind the wall of the Gift represent the opportunity to meet suffering where it lies and transform pain and embodied memory into transcendent experience. The specificity of narrative in Daybed and the Gift become a point of discourse. Memory is ephemeral, and traumatic childhood events in particular can form memories that are non-linear. While there seems to be some story taking place between the works in Mending, it is not important that the viewer have access to it or connect with details, because the memories being conveyed are more experiential than narratively defined. In the second half of the exhibition, ritual is used to process the physicality of somatic ancestral trauma through a series of acts designed to harness elemental power and reconcile memory. These works articulate a process by which familial cycles of abuse might be broken. The rituals gesture at an ambition to commemorate and heal an entire lineage of mistreated and traumatized women from my ancestry. In contrast to the linear experience of Benjamin's excavation, Ruby Gibson's somatic archaeology provides a process for mending that is holistically experiential. While practicing somatic archaeology, one sits or lies in stillness and brings attention to a specific ailing area of the body. The practice is a form of meditation with very intuitive processing. Rather than dissolving or effortlessly releasing thoughts, as in many forms of mindful meditation, in somatic archaeology, one allows the sensation or pain to inform them from a space of deep ancestral knowledge. Gibson's technique is meant to address our somatic inheritance directly through communication with lineage. She believes that, quote, just as the earth contains the historical library of life in its ruins, graves, trees, rocks, and oceans, our bodies inherit the archives of our ancestors in their cells, muscles, blood, and bones. The Ecology of Shame is an ongoing ritual performance series. The work began as an exploration of the trauma healing process and the often unbridled subconscious shame of unresolved childhood abuse. The work is designed around 3 seasonal rituals that intend to guide one in elemental immersion and the transformative properties of air, fire, earth, and water. In the fall of 2018, I created Letter Ritual. I wrote a letter to one of my childhood abusers. The letter was also directed towards my mother's abusers, people I had never known and only knew existed through my aunt's confidence. I kept the letter folded and tucked away for over a month before descending with it into the woods on a dark autumn evening. With a stick, I dug a small hole and swept aside the drying leaves to create a round space of lusciously fragrant humus. I lit the candle and began to burn a corner of the letter as a drizzle started to fall from the sky. The paper fell apart, charred on the edges, largely gone, but some pieces were too damp to burn. I buried these fragments at the base of the tree. Over the winter, I ruminated deeply about somatic trauma, the shame it inflicts, and what it induces us to enact on others. In response to the cycles of abuse that I have been victim of and have perpetuated, I developed Bone Ritual in compassion for myself and those I have harmed. In previous years, my partner and I raised and harvested pigs on pasture land. As we were consuming the rib meat of the last of our animals, I was overcome by a deep kinship with her and sadness that triggered a trauma memory. I kept the bones to contemplate our shared impermanence and the ways in which our lives had been connected. After honoring the animals' bones for some time, I strung them together and burned them in a ceremonial full moon fire. This act signified the symbolic release of the residues of trauma, transforming the physical body into matter to release held karma in a bond of reconciliation. The following spring, I performed Mud Ritual. On a cold morning in late March, I hiked down to a creek at the bottom of a nearby ravine to submerge myself in the cleansing earth. I sank my bare feet into the water and searched with goosebumps for the appropriate palette for the ritual act. The ritual objects are an archiving of the gesture, similar to the objects used within the media installation reconstructions, and they require time and contemplation. Untitled 1, 2, and 3 were made during post-ritual photography shoots to mark the transformation of each experience. Each piece was reflectively reconstructed in the studio from the documentation of the ritual processes. Originally, the untitled works were printed as life-size digital photographs, but after months of experimenting, I chose the cyanotype photographic process. The physicality of the cyanotype process allowed a directness with the medium that is important to the human act of ritual. The hand is seen and a painterly approach given to the images that matches the poetic motion of these works. In Untitled 1, I strung the charred and burnt bones from the bone ritual across my bare back. Untitled 2 presents a nude figure in a child's posed position with leaf litter and remnants of letter ritual strewn along the spine next to the lit beeswax candle. Mud and chamomile flowers are thickly plastered over the bare chest in Untitled 3, and impasto earthen smudging to culminate Mud Ritual. In these images, the ritual objects and materials are symbolically integrated with the body to signify cohesion with nature and personal acts of ancestral reconciliation. The final piece within the Ecology of Shame series is a biological artwork called Burn and Bury This. I returned to the letter ritual tree in the spring of the following year to exhume the decomposing letter remnants. Intending to preserve the ritual experience, I added these along with soil, motherwort herb, and pieces of the burnt letter to a glass terrarium box. The constructed box is engraved with 4 instructive haiku poems representative of the undertaken ritual processes. Through the enclosure, we can watch the visible decomposition and regeneration of matter, signifying impermanence and healing. The living materials and the ritual objects are displayed as an index of the consciousness healing practices in the ecology of shame. Lustration, the culminating work of the thesis, portrays the shared ritual of a daughter washing her mother's hair, juxtaposed with immediate grief processing through movement. How and how not to be touched is learned by the daughter from the mother, when the mother has not learned herself the powerful security that maternal touch can provide, but rather has been victimized by it. Intrinsic fears prevent her from knowing and sharing this knowledge with her daughter. To lustrate is to cleanse. The vertically formatted ritual performance video reframe touch between mother and daughter and acknowledge suffering to make space for forgiveness and release. Lustration presents a collaborative, silent acknowledgement between mother and daughter who share trauma. Collaboration is required to fulfill the task of reconciling a deeply ingrained embodied memory of violence. In many healing modalities, there is a witness present, whether this is a therapist or a shaman or some other being that holds space for the person undergoing transformation. The presence of the witness is meant to hold space during the difficult journey that one might encounter while experiencing sensations and emotions related to past experience. The conceptual framework for the body of work presented in Mending asks if media can play the role of a witness to the reconciliation of embodied trauma. While the lifelong process of healing trauma involves a series of important relationships with outside experts, there is no relationship in the healing process stronger or more important than with oneself. In my thesis work, media has the potential to provide space for reflexive self-witness in the healing process. This is not about the technology used to capture the image, but rather the media produced. In this way, media can provide witness to the reconciliation of the invisible trauma experience in the body. Walter Benjamin's archaeological method of memory excavation would have us believe that we must dig for our past, when in fact we carry the sensorial experiences of our lives with us all the time. The patriarchal implications in Benjamin's excavation and memory text are deeper than his era-driven use of the dominant masculine pronoun. While the metaphor of turning and scattering earth holds relevance to Mending ceremonial gestures, Benjamin's excavation is colonialist appropriation, juxtaposing, quote, torsos in a collector's gallery to the obscured past and suggesting we must pillage to find our secret cache. The archaic view of dug-up stories and memories is as outdated as misogyny and oppression. Deservedly, the second decade of the 21st century has ushered in a new era of opposition to the status quo. It is time to burn down the heroes that have shackled our bodies and souls, to make space for the heroines who liberate and invite us to notice and sense our bodies, the external world, and our inner landscape of memory and trauma. Mending demonstrates through contemporary art practice that we can attend to the sensorial knowledge of embodied memory in order to reconcile our past experiences.